existing program. It's stretching it to a older population, and it's identified some crime types that are kind of beyond its current sort of remit and purview. And then I guess the feedback that I would want us to give is, you know, the requirement, or, you know, that it's really got to focus on that. I could see the way that, because the proposal was so heavily, there's so much language around kind of lower level types of offenses, younger population, youth that seemingly are quite already, they possibly already adjudicated. You know, all the work that's done at Rogue Valley Youth Correctional Facility are adjudicated youth. So, you know, really the challenge to resolve in their system partners is to not fall back on what they know, but to really do this stretch into new territory, new case types, diversion away from, you know, prosecution and conviction. And I think that's their intent, but it got a little lost in a lot of other words.
Tristan?
One thing I like about this application, but would like some clarification on, is the self-referral piece. You know, they talk about having, you know, I mean, you know, we talked about the like pre-arrest diversion as being really great because you're really removing people from the system. Well, you know, from my view, I think that is true, but the self-referral to me is like the gold standard. You know, you are completely circumventing, you're going straight from harm party to restorative justice, which I think is a really unique part of this application. I just would want clarification that there is an agreement with the DA's office or to not prosecute those. From my, and this is outside of the scope of this application, so I don't know if it's appropriate to say, but from my understanding of Resolve's program, at least as it relates to the co-op, they do have that agreement. So I would expect that they have it for the other places that are doing the self-referral. But it would just, you know, along with getting confirmation that the VIA program is genuinely diversionary and that people's cases are getting dismissed, I would just want to also ensure that there's that aspect of a non-prosecution agreement for the self-referral. And maybe that was in the application. If somebody can correct me on that, let me know. Sorry.
Simon, did you have another comment?
No, sorry, I'll lower my hand.
No worries. Okay, so I've got, you know, clarification, like Tristan's comment just now, clarification with DA, or clarification regarding, is there an agreement in place with the DA to not prosecute those self-referral cases? Is the VIA program, you know, actually diversion? Are there any other, I know we had talked about a little bit about caseload or like concerns around caseload, but you know, did the paragraph that Elaine and Simon found kind of address that? Do we still have concerns over that?
I want to go back to something that was said earlier, and may just be to put in a bookmark when we're talking about the supplemental funding. You know, I think depending on the organization you have, or the organizations that you've kind of grown up in, you tend to write grants that really are going to meet all of your needs, or you do sort of minimize so that you're not asking for too much. And I wonder if one of the things that we can do in the sort of conversation about the supplemental funds, in addition to paid facilitators, is also think about, you know, adequate staff funding, adequate staffing, so that if people have you know, sort of minimize that need in hopes of getting a grant through, and they actually do have other needs that they did not address in their application, or if they had change in the other commitments of, I don't know, I just kind of want to make it, what we want is we want very successful projects. And if money would make them more successful, and if us prioritizing ways of spending that money would help make them more successful, I'd like to include, adequate staffing as one of those, and whether that's paid facilitators or whether it's other staffing needs. Also, time and support for the partnership development that many of these projects are needing to do, because we can see that it's thin or that it's not quite in place yet. That's just another area that kind of comes to mind, is really, really getting a very good return on these investments because we have it. So having some say in moving that out in ways that are very strategic, I guess, and asking people to make strategic cases for why adding money to their budgets would make them more likely to be successful than their original proposal. So,
Elaine, I like how you frame that, and I guess we'll talk about this later. I would want that to be something they wouldn't. It's not something they could come immediately and ask for additional resources, because what I think it would be having a fast review process, say 6 months from now, as they're beginning to build things, as they're beginning to respond to the feedback and the requests of the CJC, of us, to say, we really want you to make sure you're focusing on this. Here's what we're requesting of you. Once they start trying to do some of these, they may then say, oh, we really do need an extra part-time this or an extra that or something. And they'll have, I think what you're saying, they'll have some more robust information, evidence as to why that is needed.
Yeah, and I don't know what the timeline on getting the rest of the money out the door is. I know it's short, so I don't know. But yes, yeah, thank you.
Bridget, correct me if I'm wrong, but to answer Elaine's timeline question, it is the end of the biennium is our hard cutoff for the general fund. So that would be June 30th of 2023. Are there any other questions or points that you would hope to see clarified, feedback given? It sounds like people are in favor of this application and approving it at its requested funding amount, seeking clarification on the VIA piece. Is it actually diversion? Seeking clarification on an agreement in place with the DA to not prosecute self-referrals. Are those just clarification pieces, or are those contingencies?
I think the diversionary aspect of VIA and just confirmation that there's some agreement, some structure in place to ensure non-prosecution of the self-referral. I could potentially see something outside of the DA's letter, fulfilling that, just something to respond to that. Those are things that I think of as contingent, because it does get directly to the definition of restorative justice as not resorting to, conviction.
Thank you, Tristan. So sounds like there's general consensus to move forward with, approving this program at their full funding request contingent upon those two items. Are there anything else that we'd like to include in those contingencies? Any other feedback that you'd like to provide to resolve?
Just the other feedback we said is really making sure they really stay focused on those high level crimes that were more impactful, which it stated there in that paragraph, but it also kind of got lost in all the evidence of the existing types of programs they already do.
That's right. Simon, you made that point earlier. I'm sorry. I even had an arrow pointing to it on my notes and I forgot to say it. So thank you for reiterating that. That feedback will be provided. Okay, well, I'll note that down. Oh, sorry. Yes.
I have one
Charlie.
more. Just the, and I don't know if it's appropriate as far as our role, but when it does go to the commission and they award funding, I do feel like for this program to be as successful as as it has the opportunity to be, that I do think it's underfunded. The request is I think it could use some more support than what they requested. So I don't know if you guys can do anything about that, but that would be my comment.
Who doesn't love a grant committee wanting to spend more money?
Great.
Who gets
Well,
to be on a grant committee that has more money to spend?
that is truly a rare scenario. All right. Well, Shirley, I've noted that down. I think it's my understanding, and again, Bridget and Rachel, feel free to pop in if I'm incorrect on this, but the commission are the ones who make that final funding decision as to what amount. You know, your recommendation does hold value. They will definitely hear it. So that's, I think, how that would be handled. But yeah, I think it's lunchtime. So let's see, I see a time at 12:06. I don't want to be a super stickler. I guess would everyone be okay with maybe coming back at 12:40? So 34 minutes from now, if you do want to be a stickler. Okay, sounds great.
Sounds
Enjoy
great. Thank you.
your break from screen time, and feel free to leave and come back. We'll leave this meeting running though, and yeah, see you at 12:40 p.m. Enjoy your lunch. right, for those of you who are here, we're just going to give folks another maybe minute to come back and join us from lunch.
Can you hear me? Yeah, I
Yes, we
cannot
can.
hear. Oh, and I can hear you. Yay! I moved places, so just checking the equipment.
Can everybody hear me? This is Vanessa.
Yes, Vanessa, loud and clear.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Hi, Vanessa.
Hi, Elaine. It's so good to see you.
It's really good to hear you. I can't see
Yeah,
you,
we
but I
couldn't
can.
chat. Otherwise, I would have said hello.
Oh, that's all right.
Yeah,
We can just say it. We can say hello on the public record right now.
yeah.
I'm glad you're here.
Thank you. My internet has been unstable all day, so I just thought it best to forgo the camera.
That makes sense.
Totally understandable.
Yeah, it popped me off a couple times.
Yes.
All right, well, it looks like we have most folks back. So in the interest of time, we can go ahead and get started. Hope everyone had a lovely lunch. So for the Six Rivers Restorative Justice Program, this application was submitted by Six Rivers Dispute Resolution Center. It is an implementation program, and they propose to launch a restorative justice steering committee aimed at increasing community-based solutions for healing and safety through pre-conviction restorative justice process. Let's see. I'm getting a little bit of feedback, so I'm just going to make sure everyone's on mute there. All right. They mostly receive referrals from Wasco County District Attorney's Office, Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission Police, local law enforcement, social services, and self-referrals. Their service area is Wasco to start out with. That's what they propose to start out with, and have plans to expand to Hood River, Sherman, Wheeler, and Gilliam counties. They did meet all eligibility requirements. Of the 7 program preferences listed, they met 6. The rubric score was 4.4, and their total funding request was $191,243.80. At this time, I'd like to invite discussion from the Grant Review Committee.
I guess I'll kick us off. I think that, obviously this is a planning grant, so there's still a lot of information that needs to be figured out, and that's exactly what they're saying. But I think there's a huge amount of potential with this grant or with this program. Particularly, I'm thinking about the letter from the district attorney, saying that he is committed to, to engaging in meaningful conversations around how the power of restorative justice can be harnessed to really do some significant diversion. And so I think that there's a ton of potential. I think one thing that stuck out to me was, the discussion within the application around the difficulties of kind of smaller community-based organizations within rural counties being able to do the planning period without any funding. I think that that kind of spoke to me in the sense that, okay, there are other grants that obviously have gone through the funding phase already without, or have gone through the planning phase already without any grant money, but that is, more of an obstacle in those smaller rural counties. And so that was compelling to me. The letter from the Wasco District Attorney's Office was compelling to me. I think that this could have a huge amount of potential. The one thing that I will say that kind of stood out to me as potentially problematic with this application was the request for funding for the survivor support circles. And the only reason for that is I could not tell if that was actually part of an alternative to prosecution program, if there was some sort of, not prosecuting or dismissing charges against the responsible party for the survivors that are involved in that circle, or if it was just completely independent from any kind of actual restorative justice program. But perhaps somebody else has another read on that. But that's kind of my perspective on the application.
Thanks, Tristan. This is Vanessa. I definitely had that same question. And I was very impressed with this application's collaborative kind of breadth and depth of the collaborations that they were doing. I thought that was really strong. But I was curious about the survivor circle, and I did read it a couple of times. I fully support funding this one, but I just was curious about that, and reading it over and over, did it solve my curiosities around, was this a separate piece, or is this part of how the restorative justice happens, if that makes sense?
Thanks, Vanessa. Elaine, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, similar question about the nature of the group itself, but one of the things that was the most exciting to me about this planning period was how survivor driven it is looking like it's intended to be, in having survivors not just going through whatever, which is not clear, sort of support resource they're using, but also really give input into this project overall. I just thought that was really good sort of bridging of whatever those groups are, and then having those groups be able to weigh in on what's going to happen in the future. So I thought that was one of the more exciting pieces of this, just really directly engaging survivors in shaping this going forward. So it doesn't clear up anything, but I just wanted to add that.
I'm going to jump in and be all excited about this one too. This was one of the ones I had scored the highest, and I feel like it does a lot of things really well. What Elaine just described, I totally agree with. It centers itself in community really authentically, brings in people with the perspective that it needs to bring in. From a crime types perspective, since I know I've weighed in on this every single time, this doesn't have the same issues about like maybe some of them are and maybe some of them aren't. I mean, where they've drawn the line on this with the Wasco County DA is incredibly ambitious. I mean, person crimes, including domestic violence, these are things that nobody else has even been willing to talk about. In fact, all of the, I think every single other application that weighed in on crime type was like, we don't mean that. And so Wasco is willing to do something that I mean, it's trailblazing stuff, and it would be amazingly interesting to see what comes out of where they draw that line, since they seem to have some willingness to engage with some cases that many of the others have been reluctant to. And finally, I want to completely agree with what others have said about it makes sense that they want to lay foundation to do this the right way, and that they're in a county where that's not just going to come out of the air. They need resources to do the startup. I think this is a really smart investment. I basically had nothing bad to say about this one.
Yes.
All right.
This was a really great application. I was so excited reading it.
Thanks for commenting, Ashley. Are there any other comments or areas of discussion from the grant review committee?
I support the grant as well.
I mean, the only other comment I would have is that, if they wanted more funding, if there was ever an opportunity, that would be great. I mean, if maybe they're one of the proposals that find after the startup that they do need additional resources to do this expansion that they ultimately like to see, I would not be surprised given the scope, and it would be something I would support.
I'd just like to offer a suggestion. My recommendation would be to fund this. I would like them to clarify the survivor support circle piece. And I think that we can fund, I guess the way that I would break it down is fund everything that is about the planning grant, hold onto the funds about the survivor support circles, and ask for clarification as to whether that's actually connected with an alternative to prosecution. I don't know if this is permissible, but perhaps one thing, if it's allowable, I would say that if they come back and say, oh, shoot, no, the survivor support circles are just this independent thing that doesn't have anything to do with diverting cases out of the criminal legal system, if they could also say, but we could actually really use another position for the planning period that would take up that funding, then potentially we could give them the full amount that they're requesting, but just for something different. But I don't know if that kind of circumvents the, applying for the supplemental funding that other applications would have to do.
I guess I wonder if not having it be connected to the restorative process would be an issue if it was part of the planning process. So if there is a group of survivors meeting for support and it's one of the services they already provide, and what their proposal does is really tie it to the planning process. So to me, it could be either of those things. It could be, that they're really tapping into a resource that already exists independently, but the way they're going to do it and why they want to support it funding wise is because it will be an enhancement to the planning process. So I think I would go with either one of those. If they can articulate sort of how it's connected to the output of a restorative justice program, more than whether those specific survivors are receiving services in a way that's connected right now to restorative practice. If it's not, if it's early, if they're not there yet, and but they have this stakeholder group because they already have relationships with them, and so they're joining them together and supporting them so that they can really have them more fully participate in the planning process. That would be, I think that would be still a fundable in my mind. I don't know, Tristan, how that sits with you.
I think that is creative and not how I read it, but something that I think makes a lot of sense to me. I think that there's a potential that there can be an intersection there. I kind of need to sit with it for a little bit more, but initially my gut initial reaction is that sounds like a great suggestion.
I have to say I kind of read it more like Elaine did, that it's part of the, I mean, they even talk, they have a sentence here. The program aims to bring equitable support to underserved communities. Input gathered through these circles, the survivor circles, will inform the steering committee as to the unique needs of various survivor populations within our community. So I feel like it's creating that very total 100% survivor focused feedback loop into the planning process, which I think is fantastic. And I guess in the paragraph above that, which is on page 9, is I guess creating these survivor circles as part of the infrastructure that will be needed. If this is a planning and development grant, they're saying the survivor circles are an essential piece of the program going forwards once the DA is doing all the referrals and these case diversions and things like that. So they're kind of putting that in the very beginning. That's how I read it. I wouldn't, and given, I wouldn't want us to put some qualifiers about potentially stripping that out. I think it's a strong proposal. Let's let, like most of the proposals have been good and strong. We've said, we're we're trusting and we're believing in what people are putting forward. We've got some questions here and there, but I don't think we want to totally start changing the structure of what's, particularly with this one. That's what I'll say.
Thanks for clarifying that, Simon. I am in full support.
Yeah, this is Vanessa. I agree that, removing, which I don't think we could or would do, the survivor circle would really change the survivor-centered process that the folks are trying to do. But yeah, I still have that question about whether it's connected to, the criminal justice diversion process. But I fully support this application.
Does raise an interesting question of, if the survivor support circles are being conducted for harm parties that have chosen to engage with the criminal legal system. I guess that's just like a kind of question in my mind. I don't know if that really impacts how I feel about the award amount or even, funding it for the survivor circles, but is just something I'm kind of, wrestling with in my brain a little bit.
Okay, well, what I'm hearing is, you guys are in full support of this application. It sounds like we've kind of pivoted back a little bit to, yes, we, approve of full funding as requested, but would, seek some clarification on exactly these, what the survivor circles entail, and yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be a contingency, is what I'm hearing now. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's how I understand it and feel. One question for you, Casey. When we're asking, applicants to give kind of feedback and to answer some questions, is the expectation that those questions would be answered in time for this commission's meeting when they review these applications? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And share
then
with you
yes.
all, of course.
Yes, that all makes sense then.
Are there any further comments on this application or concerns or questions? Okay, I think then there's general consensus moving forward with full funding recommendation and, seeking some clarification around those survivor circles. Moving on, this is the last application. You've made it. There's light at the end. So the Washington County Restorative Justice Collaborative was submitted by the City of Beaverton Center for Mediation and Dialogue. It is an established program. They are proposing development of planning and community organizing process to foster expansion of the existing restorative justice programs, offered to youth, to youth. So they are planning to, seek referrals from the Juvenile Crime Prevention Advisory Committee, school districts, culturally specific organizations serving the greater Washington County area. They met all eligibility requirements, 4 of the program preferences, and rubric score 3.1, and funding request of $90,200.
Casey, I'll just pipe up. On the program preferences, this was another application where some of the answers were vague, and so the sort of benefit of the doubt went to the applicant. For example, there is, this offering culturally appropriate services. There's no service aspect to this grant as written yet, but there is a discussion of and a line item for translation and interpreter services. So as to be able to engage people in this community process, whether you feel that that is appropriate enough to meet that preference is up to you. If you don't, we would drop it. I mean, view it as dropping it down one. The second one, and it was very vague. Again, they were talking about engaging a lot with schools, and one of the sort of examples was school fights. Now, you could potentially construe that to be crime types that include physical altercations between youth, whether that raises to the level of person misdemeanors. Again, I will defer to the group. If you were to discount those two sort of vague applications, you would have two preferences met.
So
Thank
I
you,
guess
Bridget.
I'll
Sorry,
kick
Aaron.
off. Oh, of all of them, I think this may have been the one I struggled with the most. Bridget, some of what you just highlighted was part of my struggle. If I read this correctly, I'm sorry, my dog took that moment to weigh in. Mina says hi. If I read this correctly, what they're essentially doing is setting up a process to try to improve how they use restorative justice principles in school districts to deal with the problem of in-school fighting. And, that's laudable. And I think restorative justice could really be useful for that. But as I said for a previous applicant that we considered, it almost feels like that is an application for a different grant than the one we're dealing with here. I mean, this would be about restorative justice in schools as opposed to in the criminal justice system, at least as I read it. And, that is something that the rulemaking committee specifically discussed. It was brought to the rack as, is this a lane we want to consider? And at least my recollection is there were some fairly specific conversations about the education system outside of the criminal justice system not being a sufficient enough nexus to create eligibility under 2204. So this is the other one that I just saw as a little bit outside of the scope of what 2204 is doing. Thanks.
I think I'll just be, I kind of echo Aaron's, again, super strong, great concept. May not be really the intent of this grant opportunity or the intent of House Bill 2204. And I get, I was a little disappointed not to see, I don't think I saw, unless someone's wrong, any sort of direct district attorney's office involvement. There wasn't a letter of support included, which therefore made me biased towards thinking it really was staying at the kind of juvenile level, in schools, things like that, which is fantastic. But missing, I think, what we're intending to do here.
Ashley, I see your hands up.
Yeah, I guess I always pipe in the end because I feel like there are members of this committee that are so much more articulate in how they word things. And I just want to echo what Aaron and Simon said, that I ended up reading this grant application several times trying to make it fit. And in the end, I couldn't get there. I really support what they're trying to do. But again, I think probably not for this funding opportunity.
For folks on the committee, I don't know that this will help. This doesn't get to your question, Simon, about DA involvement. There is a support letter from the LIPSIC. You can construe that as well as you like. That includes the DA, but certainly doesn't address the question about the actual involvement. But did want to flag that just in case.
Elaine?
That's what I was going to say also, is that the Public Safety Coordinating Council did submit a letter, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this back to back with the Six Rivers is another planning project, right? It's get the people together and think about these things. what's different really is the difference in who's getting targeted for attention, and I can't disagree with what folks have said about the focus being really on schools, and their biggest example being person crimes potentially, but in schools. And you know, I think they could have made a better case and gotten more connection to the criminal justice. I mean, the juvenile justice system is connected to this proposal, but no district attorney, and not the juvenile district attorney, you know, so.
Ashley, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I guess the other thing I was gonna say is this kind of Elaine motivated my brain around like one of their specific examples being formal accountability agreements. And again, while I really support restorative justice and their use in the juvenile system, it's not going to do what the goal was, which was reduce persons' engagement in the criminal justice system. Formal accountability agreements are already kind of outside of that and not going to lend to maybe, you know, time incarcerated or things like that, which we were hoping to reduce.
Can you explain what I'm not understanding what you're saying about formal about how it would affect it by focusing on it? I'm just a little confused.
Yeah, so and anybody who knows more, so Erin, if you want to, you know, trump me, please do. But formal accountability agreements are kind of a juvenile version, oh gosh, of their own kind of diversionary track. So it, instead of being filed, like for example, in Deschutes, formal accountability agreements are 100% handled in the juvenile justice system and not filed in court. So they're handled internally by a justice officer, and successful completion of a formal accountability agreement would result in no charges filed in a criminal case.
And what does this proposal say that has this be problematic for you?
Not necessarily problematic, but they were talking about the focus of like the fighting in schools and the formal accountability agreements. Formal accountability agreements are already diversionary in how they are designed. And so it doesn't get at the heart of the restorative justice definition of trying to divert people out of the system, because formal accountability agreements are already a way of diverting youth out of the system. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
You are. I was just trying to make sense of what they were proposing around formal accountability agreements. I'm looking. Can you tell me the page you're reading that on? I'm just trying to find it.
Well, I'm going from memory. Let me pull it up.
Yeah.
If it helps, I'll just quote on page 11, one of the, I think towards the bottom, many youth serving agencies and school partners have expressed enthusiasm for improved coordination among stakeholders to better meet these youth needs through restorative opportunities. Organizations that provide wraparound services and culturally specific services will be able to support identifying and addressing underlying root causes of behaviors. Their participation would also lend insights into the trends they're seeing, opportunities, new ways to balance accountability, skill development, public safety, victim reparation when harm occurs. Which again is all awesome. It's work I love. It's much more we should be doing, but I'm not sure if it's you know fitting in the target of this grant initiative. And that's, I mean, I just took a tiny snapshot. It's not the only piece of what they're saying, but.
And I would just I agree with what other people have said. You know, I had a very similar read on this application as, you know, just really not getting there in terms of the eligibility criteria that we've set. And, you know, I think it really speaks to an unfortunate thing, which is that Whether someone is able to submit a strong application depends on the politics in their county and the district attorney's willingness to divert cases. And so, I'm sure there's an incredibly strong foundation for creating restorative justice in Washington County, but there's no demonstration that there's any willingness on the part of any system partner that could genuinely defer cases. And it's a little unfortunate that we're having this conversation now and not a month out after the district attorney's race has happened, and potentially somebody new is in power and willing to do these things, but it's not a that's not something we can rely on, or yeah, and it's just an unfortunate reality.
Yeah, I'm reading the paragraph where it says victim services staff at the Washington County Juvenile Department, as well as the district attorney assigned to the juvenile department, will be key allies, but no declaration of that alliance now. Is that's what you're saying? That's what you're seeing? Yeah. And just for transparency, it's not a conflict, but my partner is the director of the Washington County Juvenile Department. So I'm trying to take a little extra critical eye here, but and
Elaine, I'm not seeing it, so I feel like I need to backtrack, and I maybe misremembered the FAA's, the formal accountability agreements being specifically called out in this application. So I just want to be transparent there as well, but in my rereading it, I'm not finding that part.
Are there, any other concerns that people want to talk about? But, my read of your responses and discussion is you seem to have a consensus that this is not going to be approved, but I don't want to be presumptive, so please feel free to weigh in.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
All right, well, thanks for Simon for confirming. Is there any further discussion? All right, well, then we will note down that this has not been approved. And that concludes at least the application review. So well done to everyone again. Thank you so much for your thoughtful discussion on those applications. And Bridget, if you want to move to the next slide, I think we'll be discussing what next steps are, what to do with the leftover money.
So for this, we have to put this together before today, but the based on the two applications that were not approved, this does not factor in any of the potential holdback of funds from Deschutes on those two positions that you're asking for more information. Just the two that were not approved. There remains $862,668. So about $863,000. There's a number of ways you can address this. Again, it does get a little bit confusing because ultimately the only body that can spend commission money is the commission, but you can make recommendations on how this, a supplemental round could be designed based on the things you saw today. One way you could do that is to have a supplemental round open to anyone for anything. Folks who weren't successful or weren't approved is a better word, could reapply, given some of the feedback that was discussed today. Folks who hadn't applied in the first initial round could apply completely new. The other thing you can do among other options is to either tailor a supplemental round for certain applicants, existing applicants to build on their programs, or at the very least, you can make a preference for those applicants being funded first, and then any unallocated funds after those folks get funded, in theory, would be open to whomever else applied. I've heard a lot of specific ideas like funding volunteers and other things, but those are at least two ways you can look at this, kind of a tailored supplemental or a open to everybody, totally new supplemental.
I liked the mix idea of having some strategic preferences, whether it's for specific already funded partners or just having, and I don't know timeline wise, I know that there's space to sort of work with this a little bit, but it seems like we learned something this round about how people were hearing and not hearing things, and maybe where some of the places we see vulnerability or needs are that we saw in these applications, that we could be strategic about sort of preferencing, and a couple of those have been written down already. But it's also of interest to see what other creativity is out there for me, around people's motivation related to restorative justice, and possible other opportunities that just because of timing were not good a couple of months ago, but might be going forward. So I like the idea of casting the net widely, but having some strategic preferences.
Go ahead. I don't know if it was Tristan or Simon next, or Ashley. I'm sorry, I was typing. So
I think
I will go with Tristan
Ashley.
first. Oh,
I think
okay.
it's Ashley, Simon, Tristan.
Or Ashley,
you guys-
Tristan, Simon.
Are you guys able to share with us, and I apologize if I'm asking an inappropriate question, but are you able to share with us if you received any applications that you determined were ineligible, so they were not passed to the committee?
Ashley, all applications were passed on to the committee, and just even if we did find, based on kind of a benefit of the doubt reading of all eligibility criterion, all of the ones we got submitted were eligible enough to get through to the committee. We do have a practice here of bringing applications, even that we didn't find in other grants, ineligible, just so that the committee sees them and is aware of them. We just don't, I'm not saying this is not like a rule in the Oregon administrative rules or anything, but it's just CJC practice that we do sort of disclose all applications received and describe why we found them ineligible if that was the case, or move all forward like today. So you saw everything we got, long story short.
Perfect. And then follow-up question, if you could share, were you aware of anyone's wish or desire to apply that didn't get the opportunity because of the short turnaround?
That's a great question. I don't know. We got a few applications started in our system that were not completed. I think that's our best indication of, someone had the interest and didn't finish. But that is something we will be looking into now that we've, sort of gotten this big process started. We can follow up with all those folks and just see, was there a barrier? Did you just decide this wasn't the program for you? Did you not have enough time? Those kinds of things. So the short answer is yes, there was some folks who started and didn't complete for some reason.
Thank you.
If I could just add to that too, the applications that were started and weren't completed, it wasn't like they were nearly finished and we were like, why didn't they submit? Why didn't they click the button? They were like blank applications that maybe someone created a user profile, which, as Bridget says, indicates they were interested, but didn't follow through with completing any of the questions. So we did at least have that threshold there, in case anyone was wondering.
Tristan, you were next.
Sorry, I was going to real quick just add to this. Apologize. Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Keck. I'm a program director here at DPSST. Those applications, I did go ahead and reach out just to ask. So in the sense of just because they started one, we did try to glean. But maybe I hear you asking, Ashley, is what the interest level exists beyond we reviewed today, and we're still actively trying to do that.
Thank you for reading between the lines.
Yeah, and just to clarify, Ryan is actually program director for CJC, but recently transitioned from DPSST, and we're very lucky to have him, but he works for us.
My bad. So sorry. Old habits.
I was surprised by that. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I guess I have a couple things to say. The first thing is I am keenly aware of the need to get all this money out the door. There are currently efforts underway to make sure that we have this funding again in the next biennium. And one thing that will really help with being able to not just renew funding, but ask for additional funding is to make sure that we use all the money. And so with that in mind, I would support opening the application for people who weren't able to apply the first time, people who did apply the first time and want to ask for more money, folks that were deemed ineligible, but now they can answer the questions that we have for them, and it turns out their program is eligible. I would say wide net. I also support what Elaine was saying around kind of strategic preferences. If I had to kind of list the strategic preferences that I think are most important to me, I would first say that a lot of these applications need to fund their facilitators. They need to create salaried positions for the people who are doing this work. And I think that that is crucially important for so many reasons. I think it's really necessary for us to acknowledge the value in the work that facilitators do in resolving sometimes very serious cases outside the criminal legal system. The criminal legal system is bloated with funding. We put so much money into prisons and probation, and we're going to say that a facilitator that's doing what I would consider to be more valuable work should not get paid at all. And I think that that is problematic for the development of the field in general, because to really grow the field of restorative justice and establish it as, a very legitimate, evidence-based, well-intentioned, well-practiced, field and a way of addressing these serious harms, we need to pay people to do them. And so I think that one thing I would suggest is reaching back out to the applicants and say, add some paid facilitator positions, and maybe it doesn't need to be all of the facilitators that are paid. Perhaps there are, a handful of lead facilitators and there's still volunteer work as well. But I guess it also gets to the question of diversity and the folks who are reflected among the facilitators, who has the ability and frankly, the privilege to be able to volunteer their time versus people who need to be paid for the work that they're doing or don't have that privilege. My other suggestion in terms of recommendations we can make to current applicants or new applicants even is the development of restitution funds. I think that that's one thing that could really set us apart from the criminal legal system, or really, create that understanding of, how we are centering the needs of the harmed party. Of course, within the criminal legal system, there is an avenue for victims to request restitution. And I think that most of us know that those restitution requests are rarely paid. If we can create funds to pay back harmed parties for the economic damages that they accrued, economic damages that they would never get repaid back if they went through the criminal legal system and made a restitution request that way, then I think we can really make this a very appealing option for harmed parties as well, and enhance engagement with the program, and also really demonstrate that we genuinely are seeking to make whole the people who have been harmed. without burdening, impoverished people who ended up becoming responsible parties for, I'm sure, a variety of reasons, but a lot of those reasons probably having to do with different vulnerabilities that they experience.
I'm going to be opposite in some ways. I'm a little hesitant to open it up to brand new applications. For those or people that entities, organizations, partners that put in these proposals, I think they can all attest to just how complicated and how difficult, and it was probably a heavy enough lift to get a proposal in. And it's going to be a really huge lift to get a lot of these programs off the ground, particularly some of the more ambitious ones. Some of the ones that are more planning, I think those are much more doable. And some of them, I think that to have brand new organizations suddenly come in with, it's going to take, I'm just knowing how all this stuff works. It'll be 4 months from now until like another portal and they've got their application submitted. And then the ability to then get that program up and running basically and show anything within a year when it's all, I just feel like that doesn't seem to give much benefit. And I wouldn't want people that are not in support of these types of programs to have some evidence of saying, we're just throwing money at stuff to, it's not demonstrating impact. It's still floundering around. I'd rather we invest, more money in getting all of these projects successfully going and having some demonstrable results and outcomes that we can share with the legislature in 2023 to get more money appropriated for the next round. I really like the idea of saying to the funded projects, okay, you've got a 4 to 6 month window to see, you're beginning to build this. What costs do you actually, what things that you underestimated, you needed a bit more resource here. You want to have some sort of victim, these victim funds. You thought you could mobilize volunteer facilitators, but you actually want to make more of those paid positions. I feel like I like that more. That appeals to me more. To full disclosure, as it were, I'm president of Restorative Justice Coalition of Oregon. I am a volunteer. It's a hugely volunteer-driven coalition. We have one tiny part-time staff member that we only just hired. I think our JCO could play a very powerful kind of convening role. And if there's a possibility of our JCO putting in a proposal as how we could support these projects, it struck me in notes I wrote as we were looking at these that there's a role for an entity to convene, support, and share kind of some of the developments between the funded projects. There's clearly, if we're going to increase restorative justice across Oregon, we're going to need a larger pool of trained facilitators, particularly trained facilitators, paid or volunteer, in working with increasingly complex cases and the increasing trauma and harm. And that takes time and investment. And I think this funding could help build that capacity. That would seem appropriate. And maybe an entity that isn't the CJC could help hold some of the projects accountable to these expectations of, we're really expecting you to work on, kind of more harmful cases, higher level crimes, and that maybe a non-CJC organization could be kind of working with them, supporting them to make sure that isn't lost. So that was my little diatribe.
Thanks, Simon. Aaron, I believe you were next, and then Charlie, and then Elaine, according to my notes.
Thank you. In what has, I think, become a growing theme for me, I largely agree with what Simon just said. I think that we should aspire to depth rather than breadth. And what I mean by that is that we should invest intentionally in a few projects and stand them up for success as much as we can, rather than sort of casting about looking for new entrants. I think that a lot of the people and a lot of the organizations that have put in the work to apply so far did a lot of really foundational thinking in the weeks and months preceding the grant application to make sure that they were ready, that they had their community partners lined up, that they had their memorandum of understanding lined up. And I think we should honor that work. You know, the folks who were able to sort of get it together to meet the deadline, knowing that this was coming and having all those pieces in place. I mean, to me, that matters, especially given how compressed the grant period is as a whole. You know, this has been something we've talked about repeatedly. None of these projects are going to get much time to scale up. And so we really want people that have been able to use the time, the lead up time to even this discussion to put those pieces in place. I did have one question that I think is probably appropriate for CJC staff. So something I've been reflecting on throughout the day today is, you know, we've had these moments where we've kind of come to a shared conclusion as a group about given, you know, we don't know whether this proposal is really going to impact presumptive prison offenses. It might not. We don't know how some of the mechanics of this proposal will work given how reliant it is on volunteers. Is there any ability when we provide that feedback, which I hope does get provided to these various applicants, to sort of pair these conversations and say, look, there's money left. There's an invitation for you to amend your proposal to you know, make the case for additional services and funding that you need for your deliverables. But while we're at it, this is what we said about you. You know, these are the questions that we had about what we perceive to be the missing pieces in your application. And with the funding, the additional supplementary funding that might be available, it's an opportunity for you to address that feedback. Or is that outside the scope of really what we're able to do as a group?
Sarah, and I want to make sure I understand your question. So my, for us to give feedback, we would give that feedback between now and the commission meeting, or at least ask for those clarifying pieces. For a supplemental round, I guess it sounds to me like, are you asking whether the folks with the feedback or needing clarity would then respond in their supplemental application to that as sort of like a requirement? That's what I'm not quite clear on.
Thanks. I'm not sure I was quite clear. I think sort of the question I have is, you know, over and over this, we've drawn conclusions about some of the applications, ways in which this group feels they could be stronger. And so, you know, in terms of whether that feedback and how that feedback will ever be relayed to them, I guess my question was, if we had a supplemental round for existing applicants, or however we do it, would we be able to convey, say, I'll just pick one out of a hat, you know, Lutheran, we're really impressed with what you want to do, but we had some questions about practicality. We wonder if you need more professional staff and not just to be so reliant on volunteers because you're going to have so many volunteers. Would we be able to deliver that feedback just so that when organizations are potentially applying for supplemental funding, if we have another round, that they know what we perceive the holes to be?
I mean, I think the clear answer is yes. We staff will be following up with all of the applicants and provide them with, you know, this is how the discussion went. We're going to send them the recording. So if they want to watch the 35 minutes where they just, you know, you all discuss their application, they can watch it. The nexus I'm not quite sure on is whether that information or that sort of clarity needed can then be later sort of a threshold for getting more money in the supplemental round. I'm actually not sure about that. But I think to answer at least one question clearly, they are definitely going to receive the feedback. Whether they then pivot and use it to strengthen an application in a supplemental round is kind of up to them, but they'll hear it one way or the other, or it will be offered, I should say. And then I think it was Elaine and then Charlene.
So two things. One is, this is just an interesting conversation, but I think there are probably some legalities to get handled around, you know, what we can set up for any supplemental round. And I'm assuming that by those people that got it together, we mean the folks that we turned down at this point, as well as the folks that we have funded for some supplemental or a re-app kind of process if you closed it to that. I was also really interested in what Simon was saying about using some of the funding to really support the efforts that are happening in a variety of ways. And I understand that Simon, you've got a perspective on how convening folks to talk to each other might be part of that. But I'm also wondering if I mean, some proposals who that we've already reviewed put in a lot of money for their training processes and for bringing consulting and training into the work that they're doing in this next phase, in this first phase. But I do wonder if there wouldn't be some benefit to somehow coordinating some technical assistance or training support, whether there are some other efficiencies of scale or economies of scale by providing some support to the overall. And I mean, what you don't want to do is you don't want to centralize things so much that you lose the innovation of sort of separate innovative programs, because they're all doing something that's interesting and we want to learn from them without saying, well, here's a model or here's a. But I do wonder if there might not be an opportunity to have some collaborative gatherings where we have resource provided or training provided, maybe even a mix or a variety of things that people could access. And I'm not really talking about, a one-off conference so much as some work sessions where people could actually kind of co-learn, and we could bring in or do some support. There's some really phenomenal innovative work happening like that nationally, and I'm wondering if we could look to some ways of again, not centralizing models or modalities that we think we want them to do so much as holding a container for people to kind of get some more learning and collaboration and some work done together, and that some of these funds could be used that way. And then lastly, when I'm looking at the amount of money that is potentially left, that $800,000+, and balancing that with what Tristan said about if we underspend this, it's going to be very hard to make the case for future funding from the powers that have those decisions to make. And it would make sense to me to really target the work around fleshing out the programs that have already done the work, but I don't know that will be spending all the money. I really don't. And so I wonder if there might be a small grants and innovation or even planning process grants that could not be the same, so that we don't give new people a chance that other people didn't have, but do some targeted funding of something that you think needs to happen or that this group thinks need to happen. So those are just my thoughts. I just don't know if we can spend that $800,000+ with the small group of people that we're already working with, unless we do something additional.
Thanks, Elaine. Those are really good comments. I guess I'm trying to be helpful here. So the question about whether we, like a group here plus commission, can spend these funds on things like a statewide training, I'm not sure about that. I would have to double check the bill. I think it does say grant awards, and I don't know if there's flexibility on, a process that would benefit grant awards. But I mean, nonetheless, even if it didn't come out of this funding, CJC is always looking for ways to support grant programs, and we would be happy to see if there are ways we could provide that sort of thing with this funding, if that's okay, and if not, maybe some other way. And then to your other point, I think I heard you say, could there be something like a specific innovation supplemental? Was that what you were getting at? So that it wouldn't be like we expect.
I was really hearing Simon and others say that, or maybe it was Aaron saying that we shouldn't. Let's give credit to the folks that have already put in lots and lots of time, sort of getting themselves prepared for doing this. And so just opening it up and casting a wide net basically ignores that fact. So I'm wondering if there might be something more targeted that this group wants to see happening that hasn't been proposed by anybody yet, or that would enhance or expand that. And I don't know what that would be necessarily. I just was wondering if there's a way to have another open process that was more specific and targeted at what the group wanted to see happen. And maybe it's smaller grants, maybe it's, I don't know. That's all. I didn't have a content part of that. I just had a concept of it.
Well, to your question, there in the past we have in other programs done something like an implementation focused grant where the people applying sort of acknowledge we're not ready to stand up a whole program yet. We want to hire a coordinator. Something this happens in specialty courts in particular, where someone's like, we've never done this. We need a year or two to get our court kind of set up and on par with the standards. So the answer is yes, that is possible. Whether that's where you want to focus your priorities. The other thing I would say is, I know that getting the money spent before the end, before this 1 year, it's a little funny, but it is worth knowing, like, we just have to disperse it. The grantees don't have to have actually spent all of it down within a year. We just have to have given it away by then. So there's a little more latitude there.
Shirley, I believe you were next. And then let's see, Ashley had her hand up. It looks like it went down, then Tristan, then Simon. I feel like a school teacher.
Okay, I just wanted to, I won't spend time reiterating, but I do agree with what Simon has shared, and I echo what Aaron shared. He definitely spoke to the thoughts that I had regarding honoring the work of the people who have applied. Just they prepared themselves for this process. They created the connections, and so honoring that. And for me, there's a fairness issue, and that's just kind of a personal bias I have towards fairness. And for those who have applied. I don't personally think that there would be a problem spending the $863,000. I think that I think that there are definitely grants that came up that were either funds needed to be shifted in some way, or they were underfunded. There's the kind of shifting of the idea of volunteers and the value that gets created around hiring for facilitator positions. I completely agree with Tristan around that is something that needs to be promoted, I guess, in our culture and society. I am somebody who mediates every day, and I personally do divorce mediation every day, which is a very high level mediation. And yet I can say that because I work for a community organization, it's just kind of like, the value has not been yet created around the contribution. And ultimately, my hope would be the ultimate reliance on this kind of work in the justice system. It becomes more of the go-to. And so again, just kind of creating the value around those positions, and then also restitution funds. If I think any program that is working directly with harming and harmed parties, to have that pool of money to be able to assist in paying restitution and making parties whole. I think that between all of those things, that there would not be a problem with spending that money. And so my preference would be to expand opportunities for the organizations that have been successful in their application thus far, and bolstering those efforts, because I think that they were all pretty dynamic applications. So I'm done.
Okay, I guess that's me then. Kind of, I guess, going against a little bit of what I said earlier today, I do agree with Charlie that we can spend all of this money, even if it is just restricted to the current applicants. The only other thing I will say, and this kind of dovetails with what I was talking about earlier in regards to the Washington County application. I mean, there's a district attorney's race happening there on May 17th. The current district attorney is incredibly conservative and incredibly punitive and very unlikely to agree to restorative justice. His opponent is progressive and takes a more compassionate, community-based approach and would almost certainly agree to restorative justice. So it may come that the day after, or I guess the day before the commission is supposed to agree on this, we might even have a letter from the district attorneys or the future district attorney of Washington County saying, yes, I'm totally down to divert cases. And if that happened, that would be really exciting to me. And I would support Washington County being able to not just reapply, but maybe even change their application to fit what could be a new possibility for them, which I think remains consistent with kind of the concept of fairness around, applicants that, pre-existing applicants, because that would just be a new avenue that is offered to Washington County that didn't exist before.
I think that Tristan, that's an interesting prospect. If we did that, maybe in the interest of fairness, that then Conflict Artistry could think of putting in a new application if they could answer the numerous questions we had about, the kind of the proposal they had. I think we can spend all this money, allocate it, with again, certainly letting the funded projects, 4 months, 6 months from now, come back with saying, as we've all said, I think it's doable. All of you who spend more time talking to legislators and government budgets, it seems insane that we, for future funding, would be penalized to say that we didn't spend it all. If we could say, this is new and complex stuff, and we didn't need the 4 million this time round, but actually we need 20 million going forwards. So we saved you 800,000 in years 1 and 2, but we're going to cost you a lot more going forward. I'd love it if government worked to understand some of that stuff in the future. This is a whole philosophical thing. We should be paying facilitators, pay them tons of money, pay them more than, doctors and lawyers and everything else. And there is a huge amount of power in communities. And, maybe this is what Conflict Artistry was getting at, is the community healing harms and repairing relationships themselves. One of the reasons the criminal legal system is so separate from the people in our communities is we've totally professionalized it, and for all some excellent reasons, but it's created this separation in some ways. So I don't think everyone doing RJ should be paid or needs to be paid. It's really what that community deems the best way, and our friends in the tribal community are almost that complete opposite model. Look at CCBUTI, $50,000, which is the tiniest amount. We should be throwing hundreds of thousands of dollars, but their approach is really the community that's solving these issues, resolving them themselves, not professionalizing it. So that's a whole philosophical thing for another time.
Oh, I see Elaine.
Well, it's a philosophical conversation for another time, but it may really influence some of how this money gets spent. I think that speaks a little bit to some of the applications from folks that are really wanting to base their effort in community councils. You know, so the idea of a community council that's volunteer based, that's made up of, you know, members of that community, does sort of preclude sort of setting up professionalized positions of paid facilitators, but it wouldn't necessarily prevent having some paid staff to really support and coordinate and train and you know, welcome and recruit all of those people. So I think there may be different paths to get at what I'm hearing from Tristan, and that is the stabilization of this program's long term. And so it may be a different strategy for different communities and different cultures. But I think that the point of it is that the funding be used in a way that is going to build a strong foundation for this work. And for some groups, it may be paying their facilitators, and for others, it may be, you know, bringing in more support for those facilitators in another way. So maybe we don't need to presume to know. Maybe what we want is kind of a set of options that people can draw from that reflect the strategic direction of support, building the strong foundation, because this is what this funding can do. For you know, it can support the expansion for established programs, and it can really help build a foundation for new implementation efforts, you know, but the strategies may be different depending on the community being served and the community taking up the work. So, and to me, that would be one of the things that I would want to be more overt about with this supplemental funding is, you know, this is right now one-off funding. You know, how is this going to sort of really stabilize what you're trying to do in your community with this population that you're trying to serve? You know, and where could you use extra resource to really strengthen this for the most success going forward? And then let people respond to that as the question, rather than us telling them what to do with it.
All right, so I think from staff perspective, we have lots of different ideas about what to suggest for how to manage supplemental funding. I know it's super helpful. So we will package these up and explain to the commission the perspectives. Again, that is a public meeting, so you are all welcome to attend, provide public comment as well. Are there any other comments about supplemental funding? And if not, we will go to public comment as a part of this public meeting. All right. So at this moment, because this is a public meeting, we like to open it up. We usually allocate about 5 minutes for folks who are you know, guests to this meeting who have something they'd like the committee to know, staff to know, just comment generally about the meeting topic itself. We do try to limit folks to individually 2 minutes, just so that if there are a lot of people who want to chime in, we all get time. And so I will start with Deltra. Deltra, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this work. I want to thank the members of this committee for doing this hard work. It's very arduous. And it makes a difference. It really does. So if you can remember that, I hope you'll take that home with you. I heard some suggestions for supplemental funding that I want to underscore because I think they would be very supportive and positive for those of us who are in community-based organizations. There was the idea of funding some sort of mechanism within our JCO to organize and support for success for these projects that are basically a bunch of demonstrations about using restorative justice. That's really what we're trying to demonstrate what we can do, and I think it is wise to create some sort of very consistent support mechanism and coordination mechanism to help assure that those successes or bring people closer to being successful. So I wanted to underscore that, and there was also mention of coordinated technical assistance, which I think is a kind of couples with that. I don't think you're gonna jeopardize individual creativity or individual approaches that our different organizations have to take because of where we're coming from, whether we're rural or urban or whatever. I think technical assistance, when you're trying to engage in a new way, even a practice that you've been doing a long time, would be really very, very helpful. So I just wanted to underscore those and offer those observations.
Thank you, Deltra. Next, I see Miles. I see your hand up.
Put your hand down.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. Can you all hear me? The mic working? Yes. I ditto what Deltra said. I was going to say those exact same things. I think one of the key things, especially thinking of long-term success of all of these programs as, you know, demonstration projects like Deltra mentioned, I think internal collaboration with each other as we're doing this work on the administrative side, operations, programming, you know, hiring, building these out. I think we can all learn so much from each other. And if there was funding to help compensate our programs to really do that collaborative effort across the state, I think that's going to help in the short term and with long-term success. So definitely want to emphasize that one as well. Just speaking from my program, I would guess that other community-based organizations run into this as well. Something that's very difficult to fund, but a key thing, especially for this work, is community outreach and education. I personally didn't write a whole lot into the budget for this because I was trying to keep the numbers low and, you know, get the program running. So community outreach, education, as was mentioned, I think by Tristan and others, I mean, politics are at play with restorative justice. Some people hear that and they think it's a dirty word. So if there's some funding available to help us be able to go to the community and really just get the word out, change hearts and minds, I think that's going to be hugely important for long-term success. And then another thing that I know, again, speaking for our program that we're going to start or expand, collaboration with other CBOs. You know, I put some money in our budget to help pay other agencies to go to meetings with us, to collaborate on some work like the NAACP. There's a couple Latinx nonprofits in our area, but that was minimal funding I was able to put in the budget, again, trying to kind of keep the numbers down a little bit. So if there was a way to put some funding to all of these programs so that we can really go to other CBOs and collaborate on these efforts, I think the more collaboration with other agencies in our areas is going to dramatically strengthen and lead to the success of all these programs. So those were kind of the key things that come up for me. Volunteer stipends, I would strongly support that. Our current program is about 50% volunteer run, heavily reliant on volunteers. And I would guess that there are other programs as they get up and running that may be that reliant on volunteers just offering their free services. So some sort of funding to be able to at least compensate the folks in the community who are giving their free time and passion and energy to this work. And also, thank you all so much. It was really nice to see how critically you went through all of the proposals and how supportive you are of this work. So thank you all for your time and effort and energy. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Miles. Next we have Tristan.
Hi, everybody. So I'm now speaking as, you know, an applicant of this grant. And so I wanted to first take the opportunity to just thank everyone here for being my colleague, for being such astute reviewers of these applications, and for being so dedicated to restorative justice. It has been one of my biggest pleasures to simply be able to work alongside and learn from all of you. I did want to take a couple minutes to give some clarification on the application from the Insight Alliance and to answer some of the questions that had been raised. I heard that there were questions about, you know, our ability to hire the facilitators to, you know, launch our program in appropriate time to be able to use the funds that we are requesting, and also some questions about the longevity of the program. I am happy to report that we have been creating a database of individuals who we think would be well positioned to be facilitators within our program, and we are very confident that we will be able to hire facilitators, and I believe one has already been hired. We're also fortunate to partner, the Inside Alliance is fortunate to have a lot of people who are already on their staff who have experience with the system, with people who have experienced harm and who are really well positioned to fill those facilitator roles in the event that we wouldn't be able to find them outside of the organization. And so I do feel really strong about the applications that we're going to receive, and really excited about the people that we're going to be able to, potentially hire to be in those positions. I'd also just note that one thing that I think is really great about the work that the Inside Alliance has been doing, along with the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office and the Public Defender's Office, is that we've been working on establishing this program for over a year now, meeting to make sure that we are doing everything that we need so that we can launch this program as quickly as possible after the awards are made. We currently have a tentative launch date of July 1st. We have trainings that are already been scheduled for June for all of our facilitators and system partners. And based on the data coming out of the district attorney's office about the case types that fall within our criteria, it's my expectation that we will have more cases that are eligible than our program is going to be able to handle, even within the first 6 months. Now, of course, part of that referral process for our program is reliant on the survivor's consent. And so that will have an effect on the amount of cases that are going into our program and how quickly they go in. But we also have technical and training assistance agency, Impact Justice, that is training up our community-based organization to be able to have effective conversations with harmed parties so that they can be fully informed about their choice and the value of entering a restorative dialogue. I also wanted to just clarify one point around the facilitator positions and the number of facilitators we're asking for. And as was noted by several members of this committee, the Inside Alliance program is seeking to address the most serious crime types that exist in Oregon. We are seeking to address ballot measure 11 offenses, which are not just presumptive prison cases, they are mandatory prison cases. And so these are very serious offenses. They are violent felonies where there has been a harm that has been caused to someone, or serious harm that has been threatened to someone. And so that is part of the reason that we brought in Impact Justice, because we don't have a program that exists like this in Oregon at this time, and we need an agency that is experienced in this, that has test run this model in various different sites around the country and knows what works. And we also need facilitators that are able to dedicate more time than for your average case. The amount of time that a facilitator and the amount of energy and expertise and knowledge that a facilitator needs to facilitate a lower level misdemeanor versus a ballot measure 11 offense is, of course, drastically different. And so from my perspective, the number of facilitators we are requesting is very appropriate when viewed alongside the kinds of case types that we are suggesting that we are going to address. I also think, there was a lot of mention around how expensive our program is. And I guess I would push back on that a little bit, because I am thinking about the impact that our program will have on the rest of the system. When we compare the amount of funding that this program is requesting versus the amount of funding that goes into policing, prison, district attorney's office, even treatment court programs, far more expensive than what we are suggesting. And what we are seeking to prove is that we can address harms in the community, serious harms, for far less money and in a much more compassionate approach than if these harms ended up in the system and then ended up in prisons. And I think that through the success that I anticipate our program will have, we can show that funding should not be allocated to the Department of Corrections, that the Department of Corrections is expensive and that it does not produce the results that we deserve, and that we can build an incredibly strong argument for increased funding for restorative justice, and that can have a ripple out effect to lower level crime types, and that can have a ripple out effect to every county across the state of Oregon as well. And so I just wanted to lift that up because I obviously am a huge believer in what we are seeking to do. I think it could be hugely transformative. And I just thank you all for giving me the opportunity to add my additional 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Tristan. Next, we have Sophia.
Hey, thank you. Just curious how the recording of this meeting can be accessed.
Sure. So it takes Teams, once we stop recording, especially a recording this big, because it's going to be like 6+ hours. It's going to take a minute to download and do its, computer magic, but we will post it on our website. Assuming it is emailable and not too large, we'll send out a link to anyone on the interested parties. We'll send an email to the grant review committee, anyone who applied. So there will be a number of ways you can access this. It just might take till like Friday or Monday for it to be compact enough to do that. But you will get it. Does that help?
Yep, that's perfect. Thank you. I'll keep my eye out.
Do we have any other public comment today? Miles, go ahead.
Hey, I just had a quick question, actually, not another comment, on timeline for the dispersal of grant funds. I mean, I know you've said many times that they have to be spent completely by June 30, and then we have additional time. I'm just wondering, as far as the installments, if those are going to come out monthly, quarterly, if there will be anything up front so we can kind of start hiring up and building staff capacity and things. So general timeline question on funding.
That's a great question, Miles. So typically how this works is, so the commission meets on the 18th, and then we, on what their approval or authorization of funding looks like, let's just assume they approve everything and it all goes out the door. We work with DOJ. It usually takes a week or 2 to get our DOJ council has to approve our sending out a contract, making sure all the words are right. We send that to you all. There is some, influence about your county or CBO processes, who was involved, about how long it takes you to turn that around. But then typically this is not a reimbursement grant. So you would get essentially probably a quarterly dispersal. We usually do quarterly dispersals. I don't actually know what the first date would be yet, but it would be, frankly, as fast as humanly possible. And we'll know more about that probably around the time of the commission meeting. But that's kind of how it works. I think our goal to get a first dispersal out would be 4 to 8 weeks after that commission approval, and faster if at all possible.
Great, thank you.
And sorry, maybe I should have said this. Typically how the awards are dispersed, we usually divide your award by quarters and you get a chunk at a time. That's typically how it works. Next, I see Deltra.
Oops, there we go. So mine is also a funding kind of a logistic question, and that is you have said that the funding needs to be allocated by June 30, 2023. The grant period ends January 20. Did I get my dates wrong? No, I think that's right. So my question is, can the funding be used beyond the period of the grant as it's designated right now?
In order to do that, we would need to do the period you can spend your money will be in the contract. And if you need an extension, that's something we can work on to extend it. But that'll be TBD based on, it's likely going to be, this is likely, so please, big asterisk, maybe December 30, 2023. If it's, it may be beyond that, it may be into 2024. That's something we're still going to work on. But let's just say it's December. If November hits and you still have money to spend, and there's, you can articulate a reason why you got to spend it after that, or why it just makes sense, we have flexibility to amend contracts most of the time. It's just that, how long do you do that? If it's like 2028, people get real mad. So
No.
but there is some flexibility there.
Okay, so the grant period is January 1, 2022 through December 31, 2023, right? Am I tracking? That's the grant period, and there is the possibility of an extension if requested or something like that. If that should come to pass.
Yes. The general rule is if grantees need more time to spend their money, and I would say they are actually spending their money, actually reporting, doing all the things, that's something we can take to the commission and say, here's the reason to, I'm actually not even 100% sure we need to take that to the commission. So let me just retract that for further investigation. But the agency does have capacity and discretion to amend contracts to give people more time to spend their award, as long as the funding is in your hands and not ours by June 30th of 2023.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions or public comments before I move to our last slide of the day? Seeing none. This is an opportunity for review committee questions and feedback. I do feel like we've got quite a bit of this so far. So we could do this one of two ways, or maybe other ways if folks have ideas. If you are really tired of being on screen, we could set up a follow-up meeting to do this. If you would like, if there's stuff that you haven't said that you would like us to know now, we can, happy to take those questions now. I just don't want people to feel like this is your only opportunity to provide feedback or ask additional questions. You may do that at any time. You may do it now, whatever you like.
Yeah, just to add to that, what Bridget's saying, you're also, of course, welcome to, write out your thoughts, send them to us via email if you'd prefer that. We really would appreciate your feedback on this entire process. We're all doing this together. We want to hear how it worked for you as a grant review committee member. Think about the information that we provided to you, the timing, like any aspect of that process. We'd be grateful to hear your thoughts about it. Elaine?
It's just a question. Is this our goodbye? Will we get back together for any reason? Because I'll feel different about the answer to this question if I know that.
Yes. No,
I mean, are we finished? Is it over? Will we come back together for any reason? Yeah.
Thank you for that question. So in terms of actually reviewing the applications, yes, this is the end of that. Congratulations, you finished that part. In terms of ending the grant review committee, no, not the end. We, hope that you are interested in staying on as a grant review committee member and helping us monitor the progress of the grantees. Of course, we'll have several updates to provide to you over the next, month and a half of what happens at the commission meeting, what gets authorized. But we usually, in other grants we run, some meetings are monthly, some meetings are quarterly, but at least quarterly, to then give you an update on the data and the reporting that grantees provided as to the status of their programs and that rollout, to process any amendments, questions that they have. So definitely not the end of being the Restorative Justice Grant Review Committee, if that was helpful.
I just wanted to say thanks, Casey, for that answer, and thanks, Elaine, for asking that question, because that is really great to know. I'm so glad to hear that, we'll be coming together again and that we'll be getting updates. That's awesome.
Hi, Simon here. First, just say thank you, CJC staff. I thought you prepped us really well. It's the first time I've done this intense a sort of grant review process, so I felt well prepared and well supported. Definitely thanks to my fellow committee members for all of your amazing insights and input. And I think we've done an amazing job, and hopefully the commission will approve things as we've presented. I'd love us to get back together, not, once the commission has done its final approvals. I would be very keen to hear the responses from the funded projects with some of our feedback and some of our, our expectations or the kind of qualifiers, just to see how they've responded. They're not going to have their full plan, but at least they thought, yep, that sounds good, or nah, just more kind of close that loop in my head, and then whatever the ongoing quarterly exec, whatever that is, process of just staying on top of this. Yeah.
Charlie, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thank you too. I kind of got in at the tail end of things and jumped onto the committee, and it's actually been a bucket list item for me. I've always been the writer of grants. I never got to review and be part of grant approvals. So this has been super enjoyable for me, and I really appreciate the opportunity, and you guys did a great job.
Thank you, Charlie. No one has ever suggested that grant review committees were a bucket list, so that makes our day. So thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Sorry, I'm going to remind us and celebrate. This is a pretty momentous time for Oregon, right? And to have this level of statewide funding for new RJ programs and existing programs to really push some boundaries into some new territory for the criminal legal system and for the RJ sector here. So we should all be super excited, super proud, and not let this be just a 18-month fantastic little side project. But we all continue to advocate and work together that this funding is not only renewed in 2023, but is increased, so that the counties that didn't apply, the DAs that didn't quite get on board with this, and the system partners, that we can demonstrate that this is really a great addition to our system, if not a great alternative to our system. But yeah, so let's be proud, but let's see it as the beginning, not just the kind of one-off process.
Thank you, Simon. Elaine?
Well, I agree. I think we should be really proud. I think it's been a phenomenal experience, and I feel really honored to have been on a group with such incredible minds and hearts. You all are brilliant, and I have learned so much about the structure and thinking and possibilities of restorative justice and restorative practice, and and sort of thinking about the intersection of trauma-informed practice with restorative practice. I'm just, the world has kind of exploded open, and I'm looking forward to more contact with many of you. So thank you for letting me be part of this gang. It's been great. And CJC staff, I feel like you've done an incredible job of herding us as cats, including during some pretty significant cat fights, sort of in earlier days. And I think we grew out of every single one of those experiences, and you did an excellent job reminding us of what we could and couldn't do, but also giving us space to really, run with things and challenge things. So really appreciate the room in there and the guidance. So thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Elaine. Cats, literal and figurative, always welcome at CJC. Anyone else?
Yeah, Miles and Deltra, not to put you guys on the spot, but please know that this feedback loop also includes you as applicants. If there's anything that you thought throughout this grant application process or online, know that you're welcome to speak now. You're also welcome to always reach out to us via email if you have feedback on that process. We'd love to hear it, the good and the bad.
All right, Tristan, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to just say another thank you to the CJC staff, Casey, Bridget, Jenny, and Rachel. I think you guys have all done a really amazing job. And I just want to say, special thanks to Casey and Bridget for, just being so available, so willing to answer my questions, ready to jump on the phone and walk me through things. And I've just found you both to be incredibly professional and effective, and have really made this process, I think, just everything that it could be. And yeah, I just hope you both know how much I appreciate that.
William, were you trying to say something? I thought I saw you. Okay. The microphone's not working, is it? Mm.
William, if you have a comment and your tech is not supporting you in that, feel free to email us and we'll send it out to the group.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I was going to say I've been unusually quiet during this whole process, and like for me, there's been a lot of eye-opening experiences, but I think being a part of the process, it has given me an opportunity to see some things I wouldn't have seen if I wouldn't have been a part of it. So thank you to the whole CJC staff and everybody on this awesome team.
Thank you very much.
William, we missed your voice today.
I know, yeah. What can I say?
We certainly missed your laugh.
Definitely unique.
Do we have any other closing comments? And if not, from staff, thank you all to the review committee, to all the applicants for, it is a ton of time and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you for all your time and work. And this is not the last time you'll be hearing from us. So this is just the beginning. So thank you very much. And happy Thursday. See you soon.
Take care.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.